Welcome to our March 2025 committee vodcast. As always, just a reminder, our vodcasts are a series of conversations with Strata experts about how to work with your manager to help you build more effective committees, whilst recognising the challenges that you, as lot owners and committee members, face. The focus of our conversation will be around the contemporary issues and the human factors rather than the precise legal requirements. Today, we welcome back our regular panel members. We have Catherine Lisa, give us a wave, Catherine, David Hamilton, and Jane Evans. David is a high-rise lot owner and one of the founders of Southbank 3006. Catherine has served on multiple committees across 2 states, although not currently a committee member, but she is busy being a City of Perth councillor. And some of that wisdom comes through as well. And Jane lives in Strata, serves on her committee, and is also has a lot to say about insurance and can often help us out with insurance questions. So we welcome you back and thank you for joining us today. A recent Queensland adjudicators case has inspired today's topic. In Queensland, a committee has a statutory duty to consider any motion submitted by a lot owner within 6 weeks or 42 days. If the committee doesn't consider the motion, there is a deemed approval process. So if the committee's asleep at the wheel, doesn't respond in the time, then whatever the application is deemed to be approved. Interestingly, New South Wales has just passed a new amendment on the 2nd of March to their Strata Titles Management Act that provides a new deemed approval process as well, if the committee fails to give written reasons for refusal, and that's within 3 months. So we're seeing different timeframes here. In the second reading supporting the bill, it was mentioned that some committees are refusing minor renovations without a reason, in other words, just a flat no, creating uncertainty for the owner and reducing trust within the owners' corporation. That's straight out of the reading of the bill. And WA apparently has some obligations for committees as well. So, Catherine, I'm going to open the first question with you. In the light of what's in Queensland, now in New South Wales, what has WA got in place?
It's pretty fascinating, Julie, because it's very confined to renovations only. So there is a process to do with renovations. And basically it says if a lot owner puts an application for renovation in, the strata company approves the structural alteration if it hasn't given an objection within 42 days of the application, or it hasn't actually responded within 77 days. And the objection part is quite interesting because it's got very specific grounds on which an application can be approved. So I'm going to read you this section right now. So it says, if it breaches the open space or plot ratio requirements of a lot, if it contravenes a specified bylaw, if it interferes with an easement, a covenant, or any other kind of legal instrument, if it results in a structure that is visible from the outside of the lot, which is not in keeping with the rest of the development, which possibly affects the structural soundness of a building. And those are very tight objections. So the one that I think possibly might be more relevant to most people is in keeping, visible from outside the lot and not in keeping with the rest of the development. It's quite interesting because it doesn't seem to have been enacted very much, that it gets to 77 days and people just start renovating. Everybody seems to be waiting still for somebody to approve it or not approve it or argue it or whatever. So even though that legislation's been in 5 years, we haven't really had anyone test it in the courts so far.
Interesting. It's very much a copy of the planning process, isn't it? When you hear what those are, except for the outward appearance, which seems to be kind of a common theme around Australia about protecting the that outward appearance, if you like, for a strata scheme, which that's interesting.
It's drafted fairly loosely, that outward appearance thing. So, you know, who's going to judge if it's in keeping or not? These are things that haven't been tested yet, but it is a very interesting provision, and I'm hoping that when they do the next round of legislative change, they tighten it a little bit. We also have a very strange thing about what the definition of structure is in WA. So they had a very broad definition of structure, which was anything that you attach to anything is a structure, rather than structural, which we all accept is holding the building up. So there's also been a lot of arguments in our SAT, our State Administrative Tribunal, about that definition.
Interesting. So just in summary, to pick up there just around that approval process, then we have essentially a deemed approval then if no response has been received, whether it be well, in this case, in your case, you've got a two-step. They can raise an objection. If they're going to object, they've got to do it within a time frame. But if there's no response, then 77 days, it's approved. New South Wales, it's 90 days, it's approved. And in Queensland, it's 42 days and it's approved. So the panel question, and I'll then go around to each of you. First of all, does the size of the scheme matter? So in this case, in your case, in New South Wales and Queensland, they're not considering whether it's a scheme that has 1,000 lot owners versus a scheme that has 10 lot owners. How many in your scheme at the moment, Catherine, where you are?
207 lots, but it makes no difference. The legislation is silent on the size.
But do you think that response time, from your perspective, do you think the response time should be different based on the size of the scheme, or does it not matter because a committee's duties are a committee's duties?
I don't think it matters. I really don't think it matters. The committee should be dealing, I mean, we're all going to be dealing in buildings which have renovations. We're all going to be having to deal with them. If the committee doesn't meet quickly enough and then there's deemed approval, that's their problem. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things we do concentrate on our vodcast is that governance element. And so, in Victoria in particular, where we don't have these limitations yet, I will say that there's a big review coming. And if 3 states now have this requirement, that's maybe it's coming, I don't know. But David, what's your thoughts around, you're in a high rise, like large scheme, how often does your committee meet? How many, what do you think about, should that deemed approval process, if you like, be different based on the size of the committee or not?
Well, so short answer to your question, the committee generally meets on a 6-weekly rotation, right? So that's
good governance. It's not a statutory requirement, but it's good governance.
And it makes out of sessions decisions by circular resolution on a regular basis to deal with urgent matters as they come up, and it may convene a quick meeting to deal with those. That deals with that. In terms of the size question, I think it's irrelevant as to the size. I mean, maybe if you've got a two lot type situation, but even with nine lots in a development, the substantive question is really relate to are these changes going to affect the structural integrity of the building, its electrical and mechanical systems? All of those things should be taken into consideration without some sort of guillotine approval process, because what you can do is you can substantially impact the fire services, the essential safety measures, all sorts of electrical and mechanical systems which form part of an apartment, but which are actually owners' corporation property generally. So I think what they're really trying to do, and this is a problem with a lot of people who seem to get into the game of changing owners' corporation legislation, is to write a prescriptive rule without actually thinking through all of the circumstances. All they're trying to achieve is you need to address this within a timely manner. That's the problem they're trying to address. And that should be the focus of their thinking, not and then, because otherwise, yes, you can address it, you can make a decision that's it. And then it just goes around again. Look, we considered the matter and we've decided to reject it because we need additional information before it can proceed. That's been the problems around planning applications in councils for years, that they just go round in a circular pattern and it can take 12 months before somebody gets a decision. So I think that's the critical thing. When I look at and in Victoria, as you know, Julie, people have a right to do anything to the inside of the walls of their lot. They can paint them, they can do all, but they can't do things which, your rules can't prohibit them doing that. Rules can only do things as they affect either the external appearance of the building or the lot, and the structural issues associated with the building. And I think that's the appropriate area that an owners corporation does have a valid role. And finally, my final point was, recently, of course, the regulations enable sustainability features to be added by a person, which in fact are attached to common property, and it's not the owners corporation doesn't have a blanket right to not approve those requests. So, I think Victoria's actually got quite a happy medium at present. And in most owners corporation rules that I've reviewed, there's always a provision about modifications and the structured process to gain approval. It doesn't have timing in it, but that's the issue that's got to be addressed. And just saying, well, you put something in. I mean, a smart operator could pick a time of the year to get an approval through on a deemed approval basis, and thus the damage is done, and they could in fact damage common property. Now, then if I was an owners corporation, I would be coming after them to rectify damage to common property.
That went through my mind, putting an application in just before Christmas, and then when everyone gets back in February, it's done.
That's exactly right.
Well, government does this all the time when they're pushing legislation through. Sorry. Well, time and time again, that's when the consultation paper turns up, is on the 15th of December, closing on the 15th of February. I digress.
It doesn't even talk about business days, right? So it's talking about calendar days, right? It's so just putting the intent is good. The way people are trying to think through how you execute it is poor. And Queensland's legislation is littered with examples of trying to fix problems with brute force solutions rather than ones which can be conducive to a collective living environment.
Yes, it's very highly regulated. I noted when Catherine was describing the legislation there, that the first part is that says basically your application is approved provided you A, B, C, D. And so in order for, say, for us in Victoria, that would be a good governance step, that you could create some protocols for the committee in their decision-making matrix to say, for air conditioning applications, for example, that, these will be pre-approved provided you, the lot owner, make sure that the outside unit isn't placed within 1.5 meters of your neighbour's openable window, that you aren't hanging it off the common property, it sits on the ground on a plinth, or if it is being hung off common property, then these are the type of brackets, these are the type of treatments, So in other words, you've pre-thought exactly where and how some of these items that are standard requisitions could be dealt with, which would mean that if we are in a limited time frame, then at least the committee's not, because there's a question about who's going to pay then for determining all the things that David pointed out, which you want to push that back, of course, on the lot owner to provide the evidence that the building surveyor said it doesn't interfere with the sprinkler system, that the the structural wall is sufficiently strong enough to hold this equipment you're going to now hang off it. The roof can hold the solar panels, all of that sort of stuff. But a committee doesn't want to be paying for the engineering advice
Well,
that would need to be submitted.
well, Julie, I mean, I can only comment on the rules in my owners corporation and in a very common set of rules apply in Victoria. And they are that the owners corporation can actually obtain advice, and that the person seeking the approval has to pay for that consultant advice. But I think the things that you need I would be having, if you're going to have a checklist, the insurances, the building permit processes are in place. All of those things are the ones. I wouldn't try to get down to the specificity of the design, but I think it's the owners corporation, I think, has a responsibility to protect the common property, and which means also the people who are in the adjoining areas, and that common property often will be the wall that somebody's wanting to put something on if it's in an outside part of a lot. I think the law really is trying to, what you're highlighting is that the legal draftspeople are trying to get a governance process in place which does ensure, in essence, natural justice. So they're trying to codify a natural justice process so that, yes, you do need to address my request, and if you are going to modify it or reject it, that you provide reasons and feedback, and then we can have a discussion through it.
To negotiate.
It does actually make me think about, sorry, dog. It does make me actually think about the for a committee to approve, they've got that office bearer liability. Here I'm bringing up the insurance aspect of it, because if you've got someone who has presented all of this and then they're saying, "Oh, we'd like this to be approved," or we'd like this to be submitted for the committee to approve or deny, I can imagine a few people sitting on their hands going, "I don't know enough about it." So, what would happen if they approve something, and your example, Julie, of an air conditioning unit being placed too close to a bedroom window, and there's, the strata is littered with those kind of stories of things being approved. For example, air conditioning, what do you call it? A condenser box being put in a driveway, and then realising that we can't reverse our cars down the driveway because the box is in the way. So, that kind of thing. So I think it's fine to have that 77 days or 42 days limitation, which I think is good, because you need to put the pressure on for people to say you have to make a decision sometime. But what are we expecting our committee members? What are we expecting of our committee members? I think it's a little bit scary. And if someone came to me and said they wanted to do something that was quite extensive, then I'd be asking around the committee who's willing. Should we approve it or shouldn't we? So I think there has to be, while there's processes in place, there has to be some consideration of the qualifications of the people that you're asking to approve.
Yeah, and Jane, just while we've got you on the mic, you're in a small scheme. And by your own admission, it's quite harmonious, and which is utopia from our perspective. It's like, hang on to that. That's really fantastic. So how in this case, these sort of applications like air conditioning, split systems, solar panels, those sorts of things, those kind of either improvements or renovations happening in your scheme, how does your committee deal with that? Like, is it something you see that you can get it in and out in an easy time frame anyway, or is it just all left for the AGM?
Yeah, I think people probably the members of the OC probably won't wait to the AGM to raise it. They probably would. It is a small OC. We have 8 residential lots and 2 commercial, and things will come up in the time that they need to come up, you know. So, and it'll be a discussion, probably a casual discussion. I was thinking about doing such and such. We do have one member who is really trying to push, or I shouldn't say push, but he's trying to see if we would approve having solar panels. But of course, that's common property. Okay, so that would be applied onto the roof. So we've got our issues have been more around issues with our common property. We haven't had anyone renovating internally, although the other thing that did pop into my mind was the personal, you know, the enjoyment of being, you know, if someone's going to be drilling, you know, on Christmas Day or something because they're installing a new bathroom floor, then you have to consider that kind of aspect as well. So, you know, it's a community. People have to get along. People generally in my community will say, I'm thinking about renovating this or that. And we'll all say, oh, good, tell us what your quote is. We might do the same, you know.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. I agree.
Yeah.
Catherine, conscious that you've got another appointment to run off. Have you got
Yes.
additional thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Just that in WA, a very strange part of the legislation has popped up. And again, it's not been tested in court. But basically it says if you are putting in sustainability infrastructure, and it doesn't necessarily define the sustainability infrastructure, but it says if you're putting it in, all you have to do is give 14 days notice. That's it.
So not approval, you just have to advise if you like, this is what I'm doing.
It's it's a very weird part of the law, and I think to David's point, I think there was a whole lot of unintended consequences. I think they want us to be more green, but the unintended consequences of how that actually happens is very, very interesting. So watch this space. I'll have more to tell you later in the year, I'm sure.
Okay. Swinging back to you, David, I just want to pick up one comment you made about that the committees can go and get the advice. And that's true and absolutely what a committee needs to do to satisfy its duty of due care and diligence. However, so you're a high-rise building with a substantial pot of money, and that's exactly what you would go and do. But most schemes are going to be sitting in Jane's cash flow position where they don't actually have the funds to just go off and engage the appropriate expert or specialist to determine all those things. So that's why I made the comment to say that most committees would want to push that back onto the lot owner to come with their application that already has all of that expert reports. They've got the building report, they've got the town planning thing, they've got the structural engineer sign off, the building surveyor, all those kind of things. So I think both are right, you know, in the way they approach it, but it will be around how financially off some of these committees are.
Well, I think, you know, in our, you know, we're a medium-sized building these days.
Yes.
We say, you know, we are particularly cognizant of issues, you know, like acoustics and acoustic ratings, for which the National Construction Code has standards, and that the building was constructed to a certain standard, right? There were standards applicable at the time of the building, and there are standards even applicable, you know, which have been improved on today. They cover, you know, all of the important things, and they apply to all Class 2 buildings. Right? So anything from 3 stories and above, my memory. So, that covers a lot of small places. So you know, we say to a person, look, we believe this could impact on X. We will need to retain the acoustic consultants to provide you with an advice. We had a recent incident of somebody wanting to polish the concrete slab, which is owned corporation property, I might add, right? So they wanted to damage owners corporation property. So we have a right, hard and fast right, to decide what we do with it. But we said, we'll look, if you would like, we're happy to examine this with you, but we'll need to retain an acoustic consultant, which will be at your expense. Let us know if you wish to proceed. And then they changed their mind about the flooring and went to what we would normally have in the rest of the building. So that's the approach, and that's found in a lot of OC rules.
Yes, particularly flooring, I agree.
Particularly for flooring. I mean, there is nothing worse than for the acoustic rating. So that's, I understand. So it's not the owner's corporation is not incurring the cost up front and then seeking it back. It's saying, we will need to get this advice. You will need to consent to pay for the consultant advice.
Do you want to proceed? Yeah, yeah.
That's
And that's definitely a good approach.
So it pushes it back onto them. And I think the same approach can be adopted in smaller developments.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. The last part I just want to touch on is so what we've been talking about is about lot owners putting in an application to the committee to make decisions. What about lot owners that want to put something on the annual general meeting as a motion to consider? And it might be, you touched on solar panels there, Jane. My daughter's just bought into a building and we've just sent an email to the Strata manager saying, when is the next AGM scheduled? We would like to have a motion put on to consider the solar grants available because it's a common property roof, right? So it's not an individual solar panel for our unit, it's solar panels on the common property for the greater good of the common property. So what sort of processes, typically this is because, again, from a statutory requirement, there isn't anything that helps the lot owner get anything on the agenda. Our legislation is silent and often would be ignored. At the very least, you might get it onto general business, not even listed on general business, but you might be able to raise it at general business. It won't be resolved at general business, but it would then be at least kicked up to the committee to consider the suggestion during the year, which is, that's an okay process if you can get any kind of general business item discussed at the AGM. How do you deal with that, David?
Well, over the years, we've had people put items forward after the notice of meeting has gone out, and the OC manager sent out an amended notice of meeting incorporating these additional items and resolutions that people have put forward. And then we determine them at the annual general meeting. We publish a set of meeting rules with the notice of meeting so that it's abundantly clear to people how the meeting will be conducted. And that's, I think, is important. And particularly flagging for people the statutory requirements with respect to questions about finances, questions about the budget, questions about finances, questions about levies, questions about the insurance, that these matters need to be placed in writing 5 days ahead of the meeting so that you can get a considered response, not bushwhacked at a meeting. And the City of Melbourne, which I have some dealings with, it has a very good structured process. So it enables anybody to ask a question about anything. And provided they do it by a fixed time, which enables in writing and enables the question to then be circulated to council officers and to councillors, and a response prepared, which is delivered at the meeting. They can attend the meeting and also ask their question, but it's the same question, obviously. And separately, that if there's items on the agenda, people can submit a position paper on it and they get 3 minutes to speak to it. So I think having structure around it in that situation for a level of government is quite, that's a very open process. So I think you've always got to have things that don't bushwhack people, because otherwise it's just a gotcha game and becomes terribly political, and you set out to humiliate people.
Exactly. And committees are,
People-
people as well. Yeah.
and people won't serve on committees, you
No,
know.
they won't. So
And,
Jane, just a quick final one. How does your um, OC deal with that? Questions. Is it just okay? Everyone just is comfortable to ask at the AGM, or is there a process
Yeah,
for them to submit?
we generally do it in general business. We've actually just moved to a new manager, and we're just bedding down, getting used to how it's all run. And we're really happy with how, with the new manager, and it's much more structured than it was before. So yeah, look, it seems to be going well. People understand when they can bring things up, and we're encouraging the owners to bring things to the committee, know who the committee are, and bring things to the committee ahead of time, and then we will, we might be able to resolve things at that stage. If not, we'll bring them up at the AGM.
yeah.
Okay, so
I should
fantastic.
I should say, Julie, throughout the year, people write to the OC. They anybody can contact the owners corporation and the committee and the chair and put matters to them and say, look, I've got this question. What are you dealing?
Mm,
It also goes to having regular newsletters to telling people what's going on, so they feel
yes.
involved and informed. And like hell, sorry, like Jane's comment, general business is a time when people can air things at a meeting, right? That's the appropriate and a good
Mm,
appropriate forum to raise. What do you do about X? How's this being addressed? Have you thought about doing X? That's a good dialogue, and it does still lend itself to some gotcha type activity. But if an owner's corporation has an engagement process all the time, then it lessens the gotcha activities, but
yes.
never eliminated, because you've got people who are legends in their own lunchtime, so they want to be heroes.
I love it. On that note, we must say goodbye for this podcast. It was great to have the conversation. The takeaways definitely are to think about the time that you are taking to put back any approval processes, and maybe put a framework in, set your own framework that you will do so within a reasonable time. Have a look at a checklist of things to help you make decisions quicker, the kind of items that you want owners to come to you in an application, so that it's already there and you're not having to chase them up, and to look at meeting rules for your annual general meeting about how they're run, so there's some clear communication, and to reduce our gotcha moments as well, newsletters and keeping people informed. So thanks again to our panel. Thanks to Catherine, who's gone. It's great to see you again, and we'll see you next month.
Lovely. Thank
Bye
you.
Bye
bye.
all.
Bye bye.